That is the first thing that'll be on the recording now. Great job. Just ultimate job.
That's what I'm here for.
Awkward introductions is what we do. Welcome to First Watch Rewatch, episode 4, covering the first season of The West Wing.
This whole season, just in episode 4.
Yep. That's exactly what we've been doing now. We're doing 3 episodes at a time, and this episode specifically will be covering Season 1, episodes 10, 11, and 12. We left off at episode 9 this last time, and we'll take you in here in just a moment. But we have our name. Do we have any branding? Do we have any music? Do we have any color scheme?
Not yet. We've talked about all of these things. We have not decided on any of these things.
And why is that the case?
It's entirely my fault, because I have the
public accountability is good.
Yeah, well, I have the attention span of a squirrel running up and down a screen door, and
you are not Trevor.
And
for anyone who doesn't understand that reference, I have a squirrel. I do not know of what gender. We're currently referring to her as Trevor, who has been annoying me every day that I work from home because behind my computer here is a patio screen door, and on that screen door is an actual screen, and the squirrel just keeps running up and down it all fucking day and annoying the living piss out of me. So, there. Now you have the backstory.
Yes, okay. So, we have real lives on top of having podcasts, as well as this podcast, and all of those other things, and there are only so many usable hours in the day, plus I've been horribly ill, and
I can confirm that. She has a magic bowl next to her right now, just in case. We will edit those parts out, because I don't think YouTube would particularly care for them. Anything having to do with reproduction or excretion is apparently off bounds. Out of bounds.
Yes. So
off limits, out of bounds. Okay. I'm doing a Duncanism there with mixing my metaphors. Anyway.
Yes. So don't have any of the branding stuff. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it, but we haven't decided on anything. And this might have to be a statement said out loud. I think I'm good at generating ideas, but I'm better at making decisions when we have options. Therefore, probably, Thomas, you're going to be like, okay, here's what we talked about, choose, and I'll be like, I like that one, or that one, or whatever it is.
So in essence, even though you decided that you wanted to take the lead on all of these projects, you are now determined that I need to do all the legwork, and then you'll just make the final decision. Is that what I'm understanding here?
Is that how it went? Did I say, please let me run the show? I did not say that.
One of these days you will be hosting this show.
I will be.
We are supposed to trade on and off.
That is true. And I'm so looking forward to when you get to watch something for the first time. That's going to be great. Also, when I just have to take over whatever. By the way, I'm Sara Shea. We forgot to introduce ourselves, sir.
Yeah, we're a few minutes into the pod now, and
I know. Several minutes.
4 to be exact. But yes, and I'm Tom Duncan, if you hadn't already known that. I mean, if you're listening to this is on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page.
Right.
For the current time being, because we haven't set up or redeveloped or did an offshoot Gmote Presents First Watch Rewatch or something to that effect yet.
Are we
the more likely person?
Are we a subset of Gmote films or network or whatever? Is that what it is?
Theoretically, we would be a part of the greater Ronnie Duncan Studios network.
There you go.
As is technically Seeking Disability, which is a great show produced by Duncan Disability Law, which helps people for applying for Social Security disability if you have any interest in that. You know, that sort of thing. As well as a much retired and completely outdated at this point, the Dynasty Download, which hasn't been a thing for like 4 years. But that was when I was doing 3 shows a week and putting those out during the pandemic because I was a crazy person.
You know what I was doing during the pandemic? Teaching from home, online.
2021, I went to work during the day. I sat in my office pretty much all day. Then, before that, I got up, I started working beforehand because I had a part-time job at the firm. And then I was doing 3 episodes a week and trying to edit all of those and get those out on time. And basically, we were releasing on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. And I was recording 3 times a week and doing all the prep and doing a newsletter for both shows. And yeah. So I pretty much worked from the time I got up until pretty much 10 o'clock was my cutoff. I'd give myself the last hour of the day.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah, well, you now know why one of those shows is retired.
Yeah, makes sense. If you had told me during the pandemic that I would do a podcast just in general, or that I would appear on other podcasts, I would have been like, I need to go back to the cemetery and hunt ghosts because that's what I'm spending my time doing. Like, that makes sense.
It's reasonable.
It is reasonable. Again, the stories that I could tell you about
I'm good.
that era are, yeah.
I'm sure you could. That's why I'm good.
Okay,
I am a gold-dipped wuss. We all know this.
Well, I think they would be funnier to you than actually scary.
All right, so we now have 53 minutes to discuss 3 full episodes.
Correct. We're
to
just
keep
gonna
on track.
We're gonna cut all of this out. That's how this works. I know that's not how this works.
Even the introductions?
Even the introductions.
Okay. Well, let's start with episode 10. It is entitled In Excelsis Deo. I probably mispronounced that, but who gives a fuck? It was directed by Alex Graves. It was written by Aaron Sorkin and Rick Cleveland. This was the Christmas episode of the season. And I will say, at least for the first 3-4 seasons, every Christmas episode like packed an extra punch. Mm-hmm. So this is falling in that line. But it was released on December 15th, 1999. Quick summary. While the senior staffers discuss the preparations for the Christmas celebration at the West Wing, Toby receives a telephone call from the office of the local coroner, and he responds by meeting a detective of the Metro PD at the Korean War Veterans Memorial, who happens to be the same concierge from the John Wick films, who unfortunately has now passed away. He was also the captain in The Wire. Great actor, unfortunately passed away. Rest in peace. Toby becomes, on the National Mall to identify a body who had been found wearing a jacket that had Toby's business card in the pocket. Toby becomes emotionally and actively involved with the death of the man, who he discovers was a homeless veteran who had served as a lance corporal in the U.S. Marine Corps in the Korean War and works to find out the man's identity and next of kin. CJ tries to push for hate crime legislation after a deadly assault on a young gay man, but receives little support amongst senior staff. Danny and CJ continue to discuss the pros and cons of a first date. Sam and Josh, against Leo's wishes, visit Lori to try and get dirt on Lillianfield and his allies, but she refuses to tell them anything and reminds them to behave as the good guys. Toby and Mrs. Landingham accompany the veteran's brother to his burial at Arlington National Cemetery with an honor guard. There is a note attached here that Richard Schiff did win the Emmy for Outstanding Supporting Actor for this episode. It also was submitted for Outstanding Drama. And also, it, I guess, won the Emmy for Outstanding Writing in a Drama Series that year. So, which is not unusual. I mean, Aaron Sorkin TV, he wins a lot of awards for that stuff. So, all right, initial thoughts on this episode. I had a feeling I should have, and you told me it is no longer necessary, but that this may come with some additional feelings given your background of somewhat of a trigger warning.
Right. And again, I appreciate the offers for trigger warnings. In general, I don't need them.
Okay.
Because I pretty much know what my parameters are, and even if something were to trigger me, and stuff like this, it is important to kind of just process those feelings and experience them. It's more like kind of knowing like nothing that we're going to encounter in this show, because there's just not enough time to for them to process it and present it, is going to send me into a spiral, right? There are certain other things that I will not do because I know that it's problematic. Like, I cannot watch Saving Private Ryan again, maybe for the rest of my life, but I've seen it dozens and dozens of times, and it hurts to watch. That's a different sort of scenario. You've heard me talk about All Quiet on the Western Front, the 1930s version. That hurts to watch too, but it's a different type of film making, and it does affect me deeply emotionally, but I can't shelve it even though I know that it's fraught, right? I would like to take some more time off from seeing it. Anyway.
Sure.
This is related to that. This episode is kind of related to all of that. So this one with this death of this veteran is really very sad and very tragic, and brings up a lot of issues that exist for veterans in general.
Okay, so if I might, and let's just compartmentalize this. We'll take it on the two primary tracks, which is all the other stuff going on, which is kind of your B story, and the stuff with CJ and the other kid, and yeah, we'll go into that secondary. Okay. Let's just simply focus on Toby and this primary plot storyline that has to do with the veteran dying. And I felt myself repeating words in my... I do this a lot. There are certain iconic American value phrases or speeches or certain things that I recall on a regular basis, and people think I'm just a total fucking nerd, and I am. So, guilty as charged. But every time I see like a homeless veteran or them having terrible fucking care at the VA hospitals or any of the other stuff that goes along with it, I see people like my brother-in-law that did 3 tours in Iraq and then decided to do an additional 5 or 6 tours with my sister when he's left behind because he was on the burn pits in Iraq. Like, it burns me. And so then I immediately flash to the Gettysburg Address, which I know most people don't. And again, this is me being an uber nerd. But those that gave the last full measure so that this nation made of freedom shall not perish from the earth. And I got to tell you, it's emotional for me every time, because when people say they support the troops, you got to support them well past when there's the initial sacrifice and what they're doing while they're there, and then there's everything they have to endure because they were there. And I see the first part a lot. I very rarely see the second part.
And what is interesting about that is that at the time of this episode, we did not have support the troops. We did not have thank you for your service, because this is pre 9/11. This is pre regular Iraq and Afghanistan war. All of that
this
type
is
of
post.
stuff.
Yeah, this is post Vietnam, where
Vietnam is the last big war that we have, and people were so displeased with it, and it was not, war shouldn't be popular, but it was such an unpopular war in public opinion. And the way that Vietnam veterans were treated in particular by the public, really, really bad, through, I would say, no fault of their own. And if people want to blame soldiers, you fundamentally don't understand anything about the way this stuff works. I think it's interesting that they chose this to be a Korean veteran needs to be of a certain age in order to die outside. But Korea was also a war that wasn't highly popular, but people still kind of understood what was going on. I remember like my history teacher in middle school was a Korean War vet, and he didn't talk about it a lot, but I was just like, oh, okay, cool. But if you had somebody who was a Vietnam vet, people would just be like, that's really distasteful and I don't want to associate with you. And I'm speaking so generally here. This is...
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to the entire conversation, whether you want to talk about soldiers following orders and whether they're
correct
indicative of potential war crimes. Because as to your point, and I watched a documentary at a film festival last weekend that was kind of insinuating some of the same stuff. They would come back as Vietnam veterans, and they were accused of being baby killers or any number of different things.
Yep.
I think his specific allegation was spit on, kicked, etc., which to a degree, given the very intense feelings about the Vietnam War at the time, I'm not going to say I rationalize and I sympathize or like, but I understand where it came from, even if I didn't necessarily agree with it. But then there's the rationalization or the separation between the people that are like the My Lai disaster and then the people that just went because, frankly, the government fucking lied to us and sent people in there. And, you know, any number of the other things that were associated with it, the Cambodia bombings or, you know, stuff that Nixon did to prolong the war, etc., right, that has nothing to do with the people who served, who signed up and did what they were supposed to do.
Correct.
Or that were drafted.
They didn't get to choose. And I think, so I have to kind of contextualize this a little bit with like my memories of public opinion from when I was a child, right? And when I was a teenager, and the way that people would talk about certain things. And it was almost, it felt like, and again, memories are one thing, and then memories of someone who's younger are another. The perception felt like admitting that you had been in Vietnam, although so many people were because there was a draft, was almost shameful to admit in a different way than people, you would assume, the greatest generation, that's the name that we gave to those people who served in World War II, that there was a sense of pride, but you also had people on the home front who were making sacrifices. So we are still, at the time of this episode, living in this reality where things don't feel so good. I remember, because Vietnam happened before I was born, growing up and knowing a lot about history, researching stuff with my dad, talking about these things with my mom, all of that type of stuff, I was convinced there was never going to be any more war for the rest of my life. That World War II had been it had been the World War, right?
Yeah, I get you.
The mistake after the Great War, right? It can never happen again. It's the Great War. Oops, World War II, but nobody's going to buy into World War III. There's no way. We have mutually assured destruction with the Soviet Union, right? We have this Cold War. Everybody's frozen out. And I distinctly remember, and this is coincidental, when they started bombing in the first Gulf War, which now we call the First Gulf War, which we didn't at the time, and the bomb started, my brother and I were at home watching stuff, and he and I freaked out because we were like, how can the war be happening in our lifetime? This is ridiculous. He broke out into hives. It actually happened to be that he broke out in hives because he was allergic to penicillin because he had just been given it because he had strep throat. So those things aren't actually related. They just happened at the same time. But I still equate my brother breaking out in hives of worry over the bombings, okay, in the Gulf. And the first Gulf War was much diminished, right? And it was a flurry of activity, but it didn't carry the same weight as Vietnam or Korea or World War II. So we were okay. We still haven't had a war. We still haven't had a real war. This is it. We're done. Like, okay, that was awful. We broke out into hives. We're going to be fine. Now we just know that we avoid penicillin, right? It's fine. We are so close in this episode to getting to 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's still, it's 2 years away, but we're right at the cusp where I think there's a naivete that I certainly felt, and that maybe we felt as a nation. That's hard to say. I mean, it would be interesting to ask, our parents or so on and so forth. But I think there's a naivete about what is possible to come, and also no clue what is coming. And so respect for veterans is, I would say, probably at an all-time low, because I feel like it just kept getting worse and worse until 9/11, and then suddenly we have this skyrocketing thing because we've been attacked on our own soil. It feels like an immediate response. We don't need to get into the politics of should we have been in the Middle East to begin with and weapons of mass destruction, but we've been attacked, we need to do some sort of response. This is a response. Oh my gosh, people are at risk. It fundamentally shifted the way the country at large viewed the military, viewed so many things. And there's a stereotype of the Vietnam veteran with PTSD, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that veterans with PTSD didn't exist in previous wars. In World War I, they got shell-shocked, which we now understand to be PTSD, but they had a specific name for that, for this specific violent encounter, right? And this episode brings up a whole lot of feelings related to, I'm saying in general, to me specifically, but also in general, to how are we treating vets? How do we treat people who are involved in these sorts of violent conflicts, who are essentially doing their job, right? The conception that somebody who joins the military is a violent and evil person from the get-go, and that what they want to do is to kill people or kill babies or whatever it is, that it is a breeding ground and training ground for people who are subhuman.
I'll go on the small mini rant, and of course caveat again at the beginning of this that my co-host does not share in any of the opinions that I'm about to espouse. She just simply tolerates that I make them. I make no bones about the fact that I am a flaming liberal in this context, and a lot of this appeals to me on a policy front, of course. This has been one of my issues with the neocons, and constantly wanting to be the world's policeman and being interventionalist is that you cannot dictate to people how things are necessarily done. And every time we've tried in the 20th century without taking some level of carrot before the stick, it has gotten us into trouble, including over the past 30 days, 60 days of this Iran war. I don't know when people will be listening to this or not. But I am not for this in any capacity. And I think that is probably the popular opinion at the moment, even economics or anything else aside. But ultimately, and this is where I will try and limit my thoughts on this and the rant and whatever else for the interest of time, that nobody needs to listen to my rants on politics. You're coming here to watch us discuss something about the show and how it appeals to us and the rest of it. But We have a group of people that we have made an implicit contract with. You sign up, you go through an ordeal, you serve and put your body, yourself, your whatever potential you may have on the line so that other people may enjoy the fruits of your labor. And implicit in that contract is you're going to get free health care. Nobody apparently said it was going to be quality health care, but you get health care. You get funding for secondary education, or I guess is it tertiary education? I forget what the levels are, but yeah, that you supposedly get funding, even though that you have to jump through a million different hoops for anymore. I went to a school while I was an undergrad with a lot of veterans, and the amount of stuff that they have to do when it should be a lot easier for them to try and work out with. And the government, especially if we're going to now spend $1.1 trillion, and now the new request is $1.5 trillion on the defense budget. I want smarter people, not smarter bombs. I know that's a tagline and whatever else. I don't give a fuck. I just want to see the investments and us live up to the contract that we've made with people, because that's how I operate on a personal basis. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something, period. And I don't see us living up to that. And I think it's somewhat recognized in this episode in a very artful way that he seems to be the only person that notices and the only person that cares. And yes, there's that moment in the Oval Office right before the end. Well, isn't this going to set a precedent where every homeless veteran is going to come out of the woodwork? They really should. And he's okay with that because ultimately we have a federal government that is letting them down repeatedly. Republican or Democrat, it makes no bones. Nobody's fixed what this contract is, and no one seems to really be trying to do so.
And this is not a problem that existed only at this time, because this was a problem with World War I. That's one of the most fascinating things about doing the project with my dad and watching these old movies and going through a history timeline is learning about the progression of events and the bonus army that incident that happened in Washington, D.C., with them being promised essentially funds at the beginning of the Great Depression, and them showing up and saying, you promised us funds and we can't work, or XYZ, and them
Do you know where the term red tape comes from?
You explain to everyone where the term red tape comes from.
Coming out of the Civil War, all the veterans that would go to what it eventually became the VA, all of their files were bound with red tape.
Okay.
So literally the entire metaphor for government dysfunction and barriers starts with the VA.
Right. It's right. So just so I can wrap up my thought, the bonus army, they literally sent out federal troops and fired on World War I veterans. People died. It was a horrible, horrible tragedy. So this has been going on for a long time. Veterans need to be taken care of because of the service that they have done for their country, all of this type of stuff. Unfortunately, I have experience in this field. Very extra unfortunate because we skipped over my brother being a veteran because he was killed in action, but his friends who have become like my extended family, my brothers essentially, are dealing with all kinds of stuff. And to this day, it's been decades for some since they've served. The repercussions that are going on of mental health, physical health, all of these things. The VA has to exist, and it does a lot of good work.
The people that work there, yes, absolutely, are some amazing people that are caught up in a poor system.
Right, and I don't want to. I will burst into tears. Right, so we can't have an indictment on the VA. Just recognizing that there's problems. There's so much good that is done, and there's so many people who fall through the cracks. And this episode is an example of that. But it's also indicative of just the public opinion feeling at the time, right? Because this homeless veteran dead on a bench, when Toby comes out and is like, "Why did you call me?" And they're like, "Do you know this guy?" And they literally lift up the coat that's over his dead face, and Toby's like, "What are you talking about?" And he was like, "Aren't you gonna have someone come and pick up the body?" And they're like, "Yeah, someone will be here later to come and get him." And you're just like, they're leaving this body out there. Obviously they're not gonna just walk away, but
well, and more specific to what we're talking about right now, when he points out to the cop that he was military, you should call the VA, he decides to cover that over.
Yep. Yeah, and I think this is a specific moment in time. This is not necessarily what would happen now, but it was a pit in my stomach. And then Toby obviously goes on this journey and is trying to figure out who this guy is. They can't find his next of kin. He finds his brother is also homeless, and did his brother fight? No, I
don't think so. My guess is because he's, as they put it in the show, slow, that they weren't going to take him.
So it could be that I was like understood that point, or that this was a result of him also fighting, but that could be. But anyway, right. So he has this brother who basically can't take care of funeral services. So Toby steps in and he kind of bungles it along the way. It's not a perfect process. He tries to say, "I can take care of this. I'm an important person," but also he feels terribly about it. We, meantime, have Mrs. Landingham.
Yeah, and that story,
talking with Charlie about how she misses her sons. And I'll tell you what, the second she said, "I miss my sons," and then Charlie asked, and I was like, oh, shoot.
Well, and that's the other part that's implicit in this. It's not just a sacrifice from one person. It's from all of the families that have that as well. Correct. I know that the contract with them is not as implicit for all of these other services and whatever else, but we have to also understand the ripple effects beyond those certain things. I think we're far enough removed now away from the draft and the amount of people being ground troops that the common practice or the common thread that a lot of people had in the 80s and 90s, where I lost a son, I lost a brother, I lost a cousin, that seemed a much more commonplace thing than anybody in this common era now would ever think of. Like, it's rare for me to understand somebody who lost somebody in action in even Iraq or Afghanistan or something else, just because the number of people is so much smaller and it's so much more of a selective group. Whereas when it was the draft, it could have been any family.
Right.
And so I think that brings something different to this that I don't think almost 30 years removed that we're quite in the same headspace.
Correct, because you have people who, at least Vietnam would have been the baby boomer generation, right? So it's the biggest generation, right? So you just have tons of people going. It's a draft, and it's an incredibly destructive war, so highly, highly common. And even in Korea, so Mrs. Landingham talking about, and the fact that it's like both of her sons, and well, you're right. It's a reduced number. And I will tell you, as a member of a Gold Star family is someone who's lost, or family that's lost someone in combat. Anybody who has active deployment, they're Blue Star families. That there are special additional services for Gold Star families that are actually facilitated by Blue Star families that extend beyond, like, as the sibling of somebody who is killed in action, I am entitled to certain benefits and services that I have used at times, and I should probably utilize more. And it's good, and my parents are very well monitored and very well taken care of. And I know that for other Gold Star families, that is also the same, and that it's a horrible community to be a part of, but it's a wonderful community full of the most compassionate people I've ever met in my entire life. And the understanding of the thread of how this affects people. Mrs. Landingham working in the White House and missing her children. I mean, it tells us something about her as a person, but it just tells us about people in general. You don't know who has lost someone in any sort of capacity. And so when there's finally this burial at Arlington, and Mrs. Landingham says she's going with Toby, and they're going to take this brother, it is like it's the perfect ending to this journey across this episode, which cannot address every issue, which cannot take every single thing into account. And I mean, we've even mentioned things that the episode doesn't even touch on, but it is so powerful. I remember at my brother's funeral finally understanding what a 21 gun salute is.
Yeah.
It is not 21 guns shooting. It is 7.
3 times. We had one
times.
at my grandfather's funeral as well.
Yeah.
Because he was a veteran as well. But yeah, I don't know how many more ways we can really express it. It's a worthwhile episode. I think it's up there probably in the top 10. I wouldn't say it's all of my favorites. I think the one that I probably love the most is the Christmas episode from season 2, which if we ever come back to this show for a second season, and I think most people kind of recognize now at this point that we're just doing one season at a time. We're not going through like the entire West Wing in one fell swoop, and then we're going to try and change it up and do some different things here occasionally. Mm-hmm. But the second season Christmas episode, I think, is probably my favorite, and the one that I've actually utilized in many different forms. But like I said when we led this off, the Christmas episodes just pack an extra oomph to them, which I think is inherent in that season. I mean, there's a reason that a lot of people pass away between the end of Christmas and into January, and that's like one of the highest death rates of the entire year, is because, at least in America, I would assume, because not the rest of the world is Protestant or celebrating Christmas, even though it's somewhat become more of a secular holiday anyway, or for that matter, probably was to begin with. Your mileage may vary. Anyway, the point being that packs a certain level of family and community and sentimentality into it to begin with, and then to add some of these additional layers on top of it, I think, especially when Sorkin has done the writing it so far in this show, we see some of these additional values really come to the fore. Him taking on issues that are of the day, but also somewhat universal. And I think you can tell, and we've said it on multiple occasions, the ones where he has a direct hand in them and is the primary driving force, as opposed to maybe he does the teleplay or he has some stuff. There are some bridge episodes here and there, but the ones that pack some extra power and the ones that are usually the most emotional and sentimental are the ones where he's directly involved. And I think that's where this show has always shined.
I agree, and I think that this is the first episode where I was fully emotional and reacting emotion. We've talked about. I've had emotional reactions to previous episodes, but this is the one where I said this show has its hooks in me at this point, because it's touched on things for me that resonate personally, but I also think even without my background, that I think this is artfully done in its storytelling and the way that it is showing us this specific issue. Because really what we're watching is regular people reacting to this situation who just happen to have certain jobs and access to resources. And it is not necessarily about the people in the White House discover a dead body. There are shows about that. But
We've talked about the idealism of the show before, and obviously Sorkin, more than most, is appealing to a certain level of identity, value, valor that comes with being an American, of how we identify ourselves and what we believe it is to be an American writ large. And that's kind of where the second half of this episode goes. And I think he does a great job of showing the smaller moments, the human moments that happen. There's the exchange around the time when Lydell, in the character in the story, they find out that he's died, and Bartlett is talking to children in the lobby of the West Wing celebrating Christmas, and he's got to go receive the news and then turn it back on and act like nothing's wrong. And I know that you've flashed on the my pet goat moment before when we've talked about some of this stuff, but it really kind of hits home where you see how much it's hitting everybody else, but that the president has to be this thing. And I think it's one of the things that I really felt, and maybe I'll go a little bit on my soapbox here, so again, disclaimer. I think that we've lost over the last decade where, and this was somewhat abdicated mutually by the Biden administration, but where the president is the moral leader and is also the healer of the country. And we look to that person specifically to lead us through our toughest moments with an appeal to our collective strength. And that's, I think, why this show still lasts and still appeals to people in the way that it does, because this is a very idealistic version of a president who, while being human, and we definitely see that through multiple other episodes as we go along, and we'll talk about here very shortly. If not this episode, the next one, I know we have some stuff coming up where he shows how human he really is. But at the same time, he still has this moral compass that seems to guide him in ways we wish our leaders would be currently.
Absolutely. And I think that, that's not to say other presidents didn't do this, but I think it really was solidified with Roosevelt and his fireside chats, right? And hey, everybody, we're coming together. We're going to do our New Deal, all of that type of stuff, right? Trying to bring the country out of the depths, right? And then it's taken on different roles. So I remember as a child the Challenger disaster, and Reagan. Okay.
Yes, the famous "they touched the face of God" speech.
Probably one of the greatest speeches ever written. I used to use it as a teaching tool for speech and debate and all kinds of stuff. Anyway, really an amazing, truly amazing speech. It would be amazing no matter who said it. But watching that address on TV as a child, having watched one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen in my life, was exactly that. The president, it doesn't matter how you view Reagan in that moment. He presented... Wow. And it's funny to me thinking about how deeply that affected me at the time.
Words matter.
Words matter. But because part of that speech was, he literally said, I'm talking to the children. And that's the sort of leadership that you need and want in those types of moments. And it has been, I do think it has been severely lacking.
The rhetoric and the communication in the modern era has taken a definite hit.
Correct. Well, and there's a different, I would honestly probably say that Reagan was probably the last great orator president that we had. Not that there haven't been some talents, but he had.
I would personally disagree with. Yeah, he had definitely a communicative ability that most others didn't because of his acting ability. But I think similarly, the only other one that I would put nearly in the same weight class as far as oratory and ability to command a room and appeal to our better angels, even though he didn't like doing it and he definitely tried to not do it very much, but every time that he did, he was incredibly effective, is Obama, because he comes out of the black congregational church system and the culture of making those great oratory sermons that are just commonplace. And so he was able to tap into something that we hadn't heard for a while. But as far as speech making and the rest of it goes, nobody remembers anything nominally said from Bill Clinton other than certain candid answers. The definition of is, okay. And we only remember certain foibles from W, good or bad. And now everything's been reduced to tweets. Covfefe. Anyway.
Okay. So let's just put a little bow on the emotional stuff for this episode. There is this other part where CJ is, because I need to put a line in the sand, otherwise I'm just gonna.
Yeah. Well, we're already.
Yeah. Okay. So CJ is dealing with this death of this young gay man, and so this is very Matthew Shepard, right? So again, this show is just pulse on, no, fingers on the pulse.
Okay, I guess it's not just me mixing the metaphors here.
No.
But all right.
I didn't mix the metaphor, I just flubbed.
You caught yourself as you were mixing the metaphor, but go ahead, continue. You can tell me to fuck off, it's okay.
No, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. I'm a little bit disappointed that this didn't have more time because it was overshadowed by the veteran stuff, but I think that it was interesting because it's set up for we're going to do this. We're going to take a stand. And everybody's like, no, we're actually not. This is not a platform
the moment from this plot line or this storyline is 2 or 3 episodes later, and the payoff of that. Yeah. And I think they make their statement, but we have to also remember how far the country's come on some of these issues, particularly for the LGBTQA plus. They keep adding letters, and I forget a lot of them. So forgive me if I'm not as inclusionary as I'd like to be. But let's just assume that I got it right for the moment here. In, 2006, we were still passing state constitutional amendments that banned gay marriage, and this was such a hot-button issue that Republicans specifically got a lot of political mileage out up until that point. And it was only when, in, I think, 2008, maybe 2010, that Minnesota actually fought back and decided to not pass a constitutional amendment by doing the first in a series of, these are your friends, these are your neighbors. They decided to, well, not decide, but they are attuned to love somebody else who is also a human being. And they made it on a much personal, they made it down to a humanist level. It was only then that things changed. And then that avalanche of support that just within, 3 years, we had a major court decision overturning the Defense of Marriage Act, and then we had Obergefell 5 years later. So the country moved very quickly. But in 1999, to do a hate crime legislation, which is still a controversial hot-button thing today because of now it's less about LGBTQ+, although the T definitely hot button, but maybe more in a racial connotation. I still think hate crime legislation, that's something where I think there's a lot of nuance, and I don't really necessarily want to go down that road. It was a much more talked about thing in the 90s than it is currently right now. But even so, this was not a thing that the country was necessarily ready for. And no matter what CJ personally, or even, let's say, people within the administration, they can only go as far as the public is willing to allow them. And I get, in the context of 2026, where we're at now, 16 years later, where we had a sea change, but in 1999, not so much.
Right, and that is what was fascinating to me about it. And it felt like this, you're right, it does, this thread continues. By the time I'm done with this episode, I was like, I would like more of that, right? And damn it, but I don't want to take away from the time that was spent on this really emotionally impactful component. And so we had said in previous episodes where I was frustrated where there was too many things going on in an episode and I found it distracting. And this one I was like, ooh, this episode is so good. And the way it was layered together was really good. And so it's not that this hate crime legislation distracted from this veterans issue, or the veterans issue distracted from it. Again, as we've said multiple times, how many things are happening at the same time in the White House, all of that type of stuff. I just thought it was so interesting. And the reminder that at the time, people had to tread so lightly. You could not just jump on, we'll say, a bandwagon and champion something. The maneuvering that has to go on behind the scenes that we probably are absolutely unaware of to this day, with decisions that are made, was really interesting.
I guess the one factor in addition to this that I don't think, especially people who are younger than I am, I'm 35 now, but the younger millennials or the zillennials, the violence that could be wrought, I think, is a factor here that us growing up in the 90s got. But the people who come behind us, where this is much more commonplace and there doesn't seem to be that level of vitriol, I don't think they can completely grasp. When this kid is quite literally basically stoned to death, that was not, I don't want to say it wasn't surprising, but it's not utterly shocking that would happen to a kid who was outed.
Correct. And I think here's also the other caveat, right? Nobody was questioning that this is a horrible crime. And these kids have committed a horrible crime. This is murder, and it is atrocious and egregious. It is, but is there special legislation that needs to happen or in order to give it a special label, in order to punish, blah, blah, blah. They're guilty of the crime. Nobody doubts that. It's an awful, awful, awful thing. But are we going to put an asterisk on it? So
we'll revisit hate crime legislation on our constitutional law podcast coming to you soon. I mean, we could spend another 3 hours on hate crime legislation. We really could.
And here's the thing, I'm like worrying, oh God, you and I probably could just sit around and discuss constitutional law. We're nerds. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Super nerds.
So any last primary thoughts on this one? Because we're almost at the hour mark and we have 2 episodes yet to go.
Yes. And it is teeny weeny. Okay. And it's about Danny and CJ.
Oh, well, actually, can we just like pull that into the next episodes, because I think that continues to develop, and we'll just have that.
No, I'm going to point out one thing.
Okay.
Okay. He says explicitly to CJ, "I have a crush on you," and I just went, and then I noticed every time they interacted. This is the thing. Sometimes when I realize that I like something, I realize that I've been smiling through something. Mm-hmm. And it's not, I don't realize it until it's over and I'm still smiling. And then I said, oh no, I've been smiling at every interaction that they have. I think I like this. And then I was like, which
you disclosed that during the last episode. We know that your lady parts are tingling.
No, lady parts are not tingling. Different things. No. But
Bad Tom.
What I had said is I don't like Timothy Busfield, right? And he makes me feel icky. And so acknowledging that he is good in this role, and even though his character is still very one note, that the interactions that he has with CJ, because CJ is a much more complex, interesting character, I like them together, and it makes me smile, and it makes me happy, and I am interested in how this is going, and so I am fully on the CJ and Danny train, and that is where I will leave it, because this was the explicit statement, I actually like you, and then I was like, so, now we can move on.
Well, we won't completely, because that just continues to be a plot line through the rest of the season.
Yes, I know.
But let's move to episode 11 at the 58-minute mark. And this is entitled Lord John Marbury, who will be a recurring character throughout the history of the show. This was directed by Kevin Rodney Sullivan, story by Patrick Cadell and Lawrence O'Donnell Jr. Yes, that Lawrence O'Donnell. Teleplay by Aaron Sorkin and Patrick Cadell. It debuted on January 5th, 2000, which is kind of weird to think about, that they would rush. You have a Christmas episode in the middle of December, and you have one ready to go the first week of January. Like, network TV shows now take off from middle of December, first week of December, until almost the end of January, if not the beginning of February anymore. Like, they basically take a full-time vacation. So to only go like 3 weeks is kind of extraordinary. But anyway, the plot summary for this episode: U.S. satellite surveillance detects that India has moved 6 warships and 300,000 ground troops, an enormous amount, against Pakistan and its occupation of Kashmir, thereby raising the possibility of a nuclear clash. The United Nations tries to get a ceasefire agreement. After receiving a dismal intelligence briefing on the situation with India, President Bartlett sends for Lord John Marbury, an eccentric former ambassador of the United Kingdom to India, whom the president describes as colorful and Leo describes as a lunatic. The ambassador from Beijing tells the president that China may enter the fight against India. The ambassador from Islamabad tells him that Pakistan will no longer tolerate any oppression of its people, and the ambassador from New Delhi tells him that India will no longer follow the directions of any other nation. However, Lord Marbury reports that the UK ambassador to the UN expects to obtain a 2-week ceasefire agreement, and he agrees to stay to help. CJ expresses displeasure about her loss of credibility with the press corps during the early hours of the crisis, and Toby apologizes. Josh obeys a subpoena to give a deposition about a recent investigation. Sam represents him on the second day, which does not go well. Mandy ruffles feathers among the senior staffers with her plan to advise a moderate Republican congressman, and Zoe invites Charlie to ask her for a date. He asks for permission from her father, the president, who first balks but later agrees and cautions him. Now, I have told you and disclosed for a couple of different episodes now that this was going to be a thing. The Zoe and Charlie relationship. It does, and it's not just like a relationship that they kind of flash on, kind of like the Mallory and Sam thing that's kind of background. It is integral to what happens by the end of the season with the show. It is a very big deal. Now, that being said, I don't know how many people understand the level of vitriol and animosity and religious fervor in the differences between India and several of its neighbors, the primarily Muslim countries, particularly Bhutan, Bangladesh, and most specifically Pakistan, and that they're both nuclear powers, which most people also don't necessarily know. So when we're discussing this episode, have that in the back of your mind that this is actually something where if this ever really happened, we would be very close to World War III. Because you're now talking about two nuclear powers coming in with China, who is also a nuclear power, and them having a spat. That's pretty close to what you're going to have where you're having a nuclear holocaust in two of the most populous countries, no, the two most populous countries on Earth. Let alone that, well, let's face it, this is somewhat of a bridge episode. It was not as nearly as emotionally invested as the Christmas episode was. It's kind of just bringing us back into the fold. But I'm going to start this episode and reactions with this one thing. What did you think of the character of Lord John Marbury?
So,
you weren't expecting that one, were you?
No, I was not.
This is great podcasting.
It's really great, which is why it's... You know who listens to this podcast? Me and you. All right. So...
Just you.
I did like Lord John Marbury. I really like Roger Rees, the actor who plays him, like a lot. He is actually a trained Shakespearean actor. And
shocking.
I know. And he played Malcolm in which is King Duncan's son and heir in the 1979 Trevor Nunn Royal Shakespeare Company production of Macbeth, starring Ian McKellen and Judi Dench. Had to get this out. He also plays the Sheriff of Rottingham in Robin Hood Men in Tights.
You mean Nottingham?
Rottingham. Robin Hood Men in Tights. Whatever.
Okay, I haven't seen that one, so. It's a Mel Brooks movie I haven't seen.
It's so good. Okay. I actually really liked his character. He is so obnoxious at the beginning, and he's fully written to prickle you. I think at the beginning, Bartlett saying, "Oh, he's colorful, haha, it's fine," and Toby just being like, "Urgh!" Fully get that in the first couple of minutes, and I'm like, why is this guy here? He's a jackass. And then by the end of the episode, I actually really liked him as a character, and I think you had said that he's gonna come back, and so I was like, oh, I liked the way that was set up a lot more than I anticipated. Now, also talking about the scenario that is going on and why he is called in. My mom actually lived in Karachi, Pakistan until she was 7. So that was basically where she was raised. Very, very interesting part of the world. It was a brand new country, more or less, when my mom was living there as a child. And it was barely older than she was. And the turmoil that has existed in that region for a very long time, let alone when they fully decided to, well, first of all, India is given independence from the British Empire and then splitting things up because these regions are and countries are fully based on religious affiliation, right?
Yes.
It is, you are in this you are in this area if you are this religion, and you are this area if you are this religion, and you're not gonna interact because you hate each other that much that you literally have to have your own playgrounds. And I think that's really hard for people now to understand. That
it's hard for Americans to understand where we're interacting with a lot of different people.
Yes.
And the most that we're maybe exposed to is the Catholic versus Protestant issues at times.
Sure. But even that
I
doesn't...
know, it's mild comparatively.
Right. I mean, the IRA might beg to differ, but
still,
still,
to the actual current government of India, quite literally having what I would put as somewhat of a genocide.
Correct. So again, just to restate, right? That area has been for generations fraught with turmoil that we kind of get to ignore most of the time. Okay, we just are like, it's literally on the other side of the planet. I don't need to worry about it. It's not the Soviet Union. Right? Speaking of the Soviet Union, by the way, do you know what happened between previous episode and this episode? At the turn of the millennium? That is actually when Boris Yeltsin resigns as the president of Russia, and that is how Prime Minister Vladimir Putin gains power.
Oh. I guess I didn't realize his assumption of power went back quite that far, but okay.
Yeah. Again,
well,
I look
to
at
be
this
fair,
stuff up.
Yeltsin was a drunk buffoon, but yeah.
Okay, but it's an interesting little real life interplay that happens in between these two episodes. So that the fact that we have this nuclear tension going on in this episode, and I'm not sure if this episode does a good enough job of explaining, as you said, like how horrible this would be, the realities of it. I think it's an interesting concept, knowing what I know about that area of the world through personal association, etc., etc. I did find this episode to be really fascinating. It pairs in comparison to the previous one. It is a bridge episode. In fact, I'll just reveal it now. I rate this the lowest out of the 3.
Yeah, I don't think that's saying all that much. The other two are much more profound and have a lot more cohesiveness to it. I think that for the purposes of this episode, they wanted to bring in certain characters. They wanted to refer to some things here and there, but explaining the full context of the conflict was not the main goal, because they're not sorting through foreign relations on an American television show about the American government. They're going through what is a possible situation, which, are we really that? Those of us in the know that understand kind of the background of things, it's not the number one place where we think that there's a hotbed of potential activity. But if India invaded the Kashmir or tomorrow, would those of us that really know really be that surprised? No. So that's what I mean is there's an additional context and understanding that some people would have that are more nerdy. And this is similar to, there's an episode later, several seasons down the line, I think, where they talk about the South China Sea and Taiwan and some of the stuff that goes on. There are certain geopolitical markers and contestation over territory and region and stuff where it is like much more severe than we think about it. This is one of those. But they don't need to go into it because they're just using it as a sample of something that was happened but wasn't necessarily hot right in the moment.
Correct. And that's exactly what I was going to say, that it is a safe choice to label something, especially in 1999. You could not get away with it. Now, people would be like, oh my God, what are you saying about this guy? Are you... No. Nothing's currently going on there, but they're acknowledging the possibility for conflict. It seems within the realm of possibilities.
It would have been a much more difficult and wrought choice had, for example, someone tried to attack Israel in the 90s.
Right. Excellent point. Let's move on.
Okay. So, in addition to that, we have a couple of different other storylines. Frankly, whether CJ's trusted to be in the know and whether she's too friendly with the press, okay, that feeds into a larger plotline storyline with everything else. I don't know if I really want to spend a ton of time on that. Mandy, whether she works for... I mean, I know you don't care much about her or any of her plot lines, so it is what it is. There is some stuff where it's again, and we get a few of these. So the CJ and Danny plot line, the stuff going on with Leo's disclosure and whether he was an addict, that stuff takes place over multiple episodes. The Zoe and Charlie stuff takes place over multiple episodes. So there's some of these B or C storylines where they like keep you carrying, and so it makes the show a little bit more bingeable, especially on Netflix as it currently is. That keeps you wanting to sort through this stuff, but they don't drop like whole story plot lines to do. So I'll just bundle a bunch of these kind of together. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on Marbury and the other stuff because, frankly, it's not the most interesting part of this. And we're going to skip a couple of the other plot lines we'll move to the next episode here in a second. But since you had asked about the Zoe and Charlie thing, and I had kind of alluded to it already, where do you feel that that's going? Where would you like to see it going? Since I already know where it is going.
I'm hesitant, cautiously optimistic. I really like what I've seen of Charlie, waiting to see more. I am trying to push aside feelings about Elizabeth Moss as a person. I am interested to see... I have to remember, like, they're consenting adults, right? They're not children. She's not in high school.
But there is a super age difference in those 2 years between 21 and 19. A man learns a lot in those 2 years.
Yes. So I am super interested to see how this would play out because Charlie is part of the inner workings of the White House and his role that he fulfills with her father. That would be different from her dating anyone like outside of that sphere, right? So specifically that it's someone who works that closely with her dad, and that her dad is the president of the United States. So I'm interested in that function. I would not give a crap if it was, again, some other person.
I think, and this might be part of it, what are her opportunities or interactions with men? Right. Especially when guarded by the Secret Service as closely as possible. Like, your interactions with the general population are limited. And to be fair,
100%.
Based on solely the resume as said within this show and how he kind of comports himself, Charlie's not a bad option. Like, I don't judge men on how they look, per se, on more of an aesthetic. but you know, like I'm not attracted to men, despite what some people think. And so I can't judge it that way. That I'll leave that to you. But as far as like, he's got his life together, he's doing an important job, he keeps stuff running, he's obviously brilliant. You could do a ton worse than your dad's body man.
That is exactly what I was thinking, because when Bartlett's like, wah, which I think is a natural reaction, and I'm like, if you trust this guy to have this close of a relationship with you, to literally wake you up in the morning and be nice about it when you're screaming into the phone. I don't even remember when that is. This might be later. Anyway.
Yeah, it's an episode later where
it's fine.
Charlie has to come and wake him up, and they talk about it explicitly where, what if the first lady had been naked in here? Sir, the first lady is in a different country.
Right. So I absolutely am like, this is actually maybe you actually handpicked the best person to be your body. Anyway,
I can already predict if we get to it. I think it's the Thanksgiving episode of season 2. That if we ever get to it, you are going to cry. Because there's a moment between Bartlett and Charlie where some of that really comes to the fore.
Shiitake mushrooms. I look forward to it.
Okay.
So yeah, anyway. I'm waiting to see what happens. Like, I'm in the roller coaster, bar has come down, I'm waiting, we're going up, I'm gonna see what happens. And then we don't really need to talk about too much more Mandy, whatever.
No.
But CJ, and I'll wait to see how this plays out. My only reaction was, oh no, when this kind of whole fiasco goes on. I think it's worth noting, like, she might be too friendly with the press, right? Because of things with Danny. Like, okay, got it. The fact that they don't tell her stuff, and that made me feel bad. It clearly makes her feel bad. They try to... So anyway, that... I reacted to it, but I'm also waiting to see what happens on that in terms of the bigger picture. So
yeah, the interpersonal relationships is obviously a very big part of what the show is as well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But let's move to episode 12 then, just for the sake of time here, because we're going to run on another 90-minute episode here. Episode 12 is entitled He Shall From Time to Time, which is an allusion to Article 2, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution, which forms the basis of the Edict for the State of the Union. This episode was directed by Arlene Sanford and written by Aaron Sorkin. It debuted on January 12th, 2000. Plot summary for this. After rehearsing for the State of the Union address, President Bartlett collapses in the Oval Office. An admiral and medical officer from Bethesda diagnoses it as the flu. But the First Lady, Dr. Abby Bartlett, cancels her trip and returns to the White House to treat her husband. Skirmishes continue along the ceasefire line in Kashmir. Again, a bridge episode from the previous one because we never resolved that entire thing. Pakistan gives control of nuclear weapons to their field commanders. Leo faces the news media about his alcohol and Valium addiction and recovery, then faces the First Lady and the President's health. Abby eventually admits that the President has relapsing, remitting multiple sclerosis, and that a fever could be fatal. Josh and Toby continue to wrestle with the speech. CJ watches Mallory kiss Sam, and has Danny come to her office. Lord Marbury advises the President on benevolent diplomacy, who sends India a message which produces good results. Since we have already been along this line, and it was not the first thing that I was going to ask about, but CJ asks Danny to her office, then knocks on the door, and doesn't realize it's her office that he's already inside of, and then she wants to see if there's any real connection there. How are we feeling?
Loved it. Loved it.
Okay.
Loved it. Yeah, no, super cute. So I love that it is cute and slow burn and awkward, and I like it. Yeah,
we have plenty more to talk about on that front, but we'll save that for the next episode of First Watch Rewatch. Now, as to one of the other big reveals of the moment. Now, we've alluded to that Bartlett's got a secret. Only certain people know about it.
Yep.
The president withholding a fairly significant health diagnosis. Now, this has not necessarily come up per se, but given the last election was somewhat based on the president's health, you could say that we've at least somewhat dipped our toe in this. I guess the last couple of times that we've had presidents with significant health conditions that were not necessarily disclosed to the public might be Woodrow Wilson basically having a stroke and then letting his wife run the White House for the last 2 years of his presidency, or the fact that nobody knew until well after he was dead that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in a wheelchair. So, yeah.
You know what's funny? I was thinking, like, I know way too much about the health of Joe Biden and Donald Trump that I don't want to know. Like, it's just not, it's none of our business. Well, this is like what I was talking about with Bartlett taking too many meds because he got loopy, and I was like, that would be a disaster now. And so I like this storyline because just in a storytelling manner, this is juicy. What this would mean, like real implications, I don't know. I don't really want to think about that, but I love it as a plot line. That
it becomes a very major plot line.
Okay.
In the second season.
Yeah. And let me tell you, okay, I was so excited to see Abby come back, and you had said before that she was a doctor, but do you think I remembered that? No. So she comes in and she's got her little doctor. Oh my God, she's a doctor. Oh my God. I was just like, I'm in love with this woman. This is amazing. All of this setup, which is, again, if you're watching this contemporaneously, yes, you did figure it out.
Tom.
Yes, point Tom, batting 1,000. So, yeah, loved it. I loved that reveal of her being a doctor. I loved that reveal of her being this caretaker. Again, no nonsense. Her talking to Leo about she as a character loved it in the moment. And again, you had alluded to things that I was gonna like her and stuff, and I was just like, great, I'll see. And I love. It makes me sad, obviously, that there is this huge health issue with Bartlett, but I had some joy watching this as people essentially were coming together to rally around him, and how are we going to address this, and what does this mean at large, and again, trying to frame this as I don't know what's going to happen, right? And I'm not going to go look at what's going to whatever. What is going to happen to Bartlett, right? Is he going to survive? Is this going to be a fatal? Is this going to be a fatal fever? Oh my God, he's going to die, and then the show's over, and I don't get to watch Danny and CJ kiss anymore. Ah, right, okay, like, yeah,
it goes for 7 seasons, so.
No, I know, Tom. So again, trying to live in the moment, but also spoilers don't ruin things for me, but living with it as it's going, it was so well put together. And here's the difference, right? This is fully written on his own by Aaron Sorkin. The previous episode, which I think is the weakest of the 3, this is where he just does the teleplay and the stories by everybody else. the first episode in this series is, he does it with someone else, but this one is all by himself. And this to me is like, this is the art of storytelling, whether or not it has a whole lot of reality in it. I don't care. I loved the drama of this.
Yeah, and I think there's a reason that it's written by him solely, because it's I wouldn't say the resolution, but we're nearing the end of several major plot lines.
Yeah.
And maybe picking up from the next set. So we specifically get some resolution on Sam and Mallory, although not really, because they never really get together. I'll just reveal that now. That thing is basically dead. It burns out. But the CJ and Danny thing kind of comes to a head, so then it can take its next step. And you get this final reveal of what is actually going on with Bartlett and why there's some issues. That obviously has been boiling or simmering for quite a while. So in addition to that, the Leo thing and the disclosure and all of the rest of that comes to a head. So you have multiple different things. And not to say that the Leo thing is completely died out, because it does continue on a little bit for the next couple of episodes. But as far as the major point, all of these things kind of come together. And while I wouldn't say it packs the emotional punch of the Christmas episode, it still brings together a lot of things that have been festering and we needed some resolution from the season to move forward with. If I were to rank these, and you've kind of already alluded to yours, I would go 11 at the bottom, 12 as my next one, and 10 as my top.
That's exactly how I ranked them.
Yeah.
Yep. Honestly, so when I finished the 3, and my note to myself is, I actually loved all of these. And so saying that the second of them, number 11, is the one that I'm ranking the lowest. I mean, it's relative, because I did enjoy all of these episodes. It was not, oh, this one's a stinker. It was, yep, love it. Yep, love it. Yep, love it. Okay, this one I liked more, but they've fully into all of them. Yeah.
They've definitely found the voice of the show by this point. Normally, when we talk about a show finding its footing, you're talking somewhere between 8 to 12 episodes. And we're right in the middle of that, where it's figured out who the characters are. It figures out what their motivations are. Mm-hmm. You have a couple of different storylines to play with, and it's really hitting its stride. And I think that's going to be definitely apparent in this next set of episodes that we have, 13, 14, 15. I think take it to a new level where they can have a one-off episode, but they also, have other stuff. So
right. Well, and again, a note to myself was I was very emotional at the end of this episode. The Constitution translated into Latin. Yep. I was just like, stick that right into my veins. Holy moly.
I thought they did a better job of writing in that moment the small thing where Bartlett explains to the agriculture secretary what you do in those case of a designated survivor type of thing, and his conversation where he's clearly, and they obviously edit it so that it's flashing on Leo, but you know how much that relationship means between the two of them.
Yep. This episode, I think out of all of them, is the master storytelling episode. Not just out of these 3, but out of all of the ones that we've watched so far. I think that this one is just, but it takes a while to get here. You need to understand these characters so that you can get to this emotional vulnerability that is required in this episode. This wouldn't be the same if it was the very first thing that you saw. So I loved it. This might actually be, even though I liked the veteran one more than this episode, I think that this might actually be my favorite episode.
You keep the handcuffs on till the end of the season, because we will ask you what were your favorite and your least favorite. I don't expect you to rank all 21, 22 of them, but yeah, we'll get to that here, and if it's in the running or you have a tie, that's acceptable. So, but all right, so we obviously had a lot going on in this episode. Again, I think we focused on the first episode so much to the detriment of the other two. But anything else that you want to kind of give here? I mean, we're still going to talk about the situation with Leo. I think that because there's some residual stuff that's still remaining or left over as far as scandal and whatnot, and obviously we just have another scandal brimming with the Bartlett stuff. I think there's going to be opportunity to talk about that, so I don't know how much more we want to talk about that. The MS is going to come up in a more major way in season 2, so I don't know how much I want to focus on that either. Is there anything else that you really feel like you need to note here?
No, well, one final note that I made to myself, and it's really more like at the end of a Gmote episode, what other questions
Get yourself some goldfish. For the audio audience, she is showing on the YouTube video a bag of goldfish crackers.
Wouldn't it be weird if I just held up a bag of actual goldfish?
Like you were at the carnival?
Like Danny? Okay. I actually just made a note to myself. How would you decorate the Oval Office? Because we spend some time in the Oval Office.
I gotta tell you, I have ideas.
Oh! I mean, we don't necessarily have to talk about it right now, but I would love to hear all about that.
The world would not survive a Thomas J. Duncan presidency, but don't think I haven't thought about it.
I figured that you had, and so...
Every political nerd at one time or another has thought about it.
I actually almost wanted to pull up a progression of pictures of looking at different ones, because here's the thing, no matter who's in charge, we recognize the Oval Office anyway. And so to think that there are these like extreme differences, there's not. So it's...
Oh, anyway. I would be very different.
Okay.
It is a functioning office for me, and people would have to succumb to my whims, and the aesthetic would change a lot.
Do you think so? But here's my question: is it a functioning office, or is the functioning office somewhere else?
No, it is a functioning office in that you have to take staff meetings, and it becomes somewhat of a meeting room more often than not. I don't think the Resolute desk is a functioning desk because there's no computer on it. There's no, you probably
Computers
have more.
Are so 21st century.
Well, that's true. And probably the president would have like a laptop or something anymore. But yeah, I wouldn't want to harm the Resolute desk, which is why I would be taking it out of the Oval Office personally.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, let's cut this. This episode is done because I do want this to be something that we talk about, but we do not need to make this episode any longer in particular.
Yep. That is just fine. So,
okay.
That'll do it for us this episode. Thank you for listening.